Hey everyone, it's me again. So there's one thing that I wish I had talked about last time that I didn't really cover. I skipped on one game that I've been playing pretty regularly. I did mention Psychonauts and League of Legends, but there's one game that I totally skipped out on, and that is Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. I wanted to bring it up because it's a game that I started playing because of the podcast. So we did the podcast on Monster Hunter about 2 months ago. Since then, I dropped some cash on a Nintendo 3DS, which I have over here. Wapa! And ended up getting Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate for the 3DS. That game is super fun. So in case you haven't listened to the podcast episode, Monster Hunter 3, or Monster Hunter in general, it's defined as an RPG, an action RPG, and that is true to a certain extent. Monster Hunter, I would have to agree with a review I watched the other day. Monster Hunter doesn't really fall in that vein because there is no level progression per se. You don't have an experience bar. The story is kind of like not there. It's not the primary motivation to play the game, which is really weird for something that's classified as an RPG, one of the driving forces of playing the game. And then there's also the action part, which should be the defining part of it, the main defining part of it, because all you do is fight bosses. Of course, there are like smaller enemies that dot the landscape in their respective herds and stuff like that, but you kind of stop fighting those smaller animals and monsters because you don't yield anything from them, which is one of those things that gives you a sense of progression. So back to why I wanted to talk about this. I've spent the past 2 months, obviously, or I should say month and a half, playing Monster Hunter, and I've logged about 100 hours. And mind you, this game came out in March, so it's 6 months old, so it's not new anymore for sure, but it's not old. I've logged in the past month and a half. I've logged in about 100 hours. I could have always done more, but the reason I love the game a lot, but the reason that I didn't log in, let's say, I don't know, 200, I could have easily doubled that time in the span of a month and a half. The reason I didn't choose to do that is because I got burnt out on it over the course of that time, somewhere in the middle, because it's a grind. In order to earn an armor set or a weapon, you have to carve pieces of the monster that you kill. But in order to get the specific pieces, you have to, and the amount of pieces that you need, you kind of have to keep killing that same monster a few times to accumulate the resources that you need and the money. So in that way, it is a grind. So that part of the game is definitely RPG-like, but that is throughout the game that you have to do that. So by knowing that from the podcast, I had that understanding beforehand. So I knew to pace myself in a way that I would still constantly enjoy it. And there's always a sense of progression in the game, which is really cool. Every single monster that you defeat is intense. You'll start off with a monster like the Great Jaggy, which is a raptor-looking fella. He's just your basic monster that you fight. I spent the past 2 days grinding this monster, the Zinogre, in order to get his armor set. Here's a size comparison of those two monsters and the player. Okay, there's obviously I'm graduating up the rungs of the Monster Hunter ladder by fighting these different monsters. But interestingly enough, the scale of the monster does not necessarily define how difficult they are, because there's a monster like the Gen Moran. You'll see it by itself right now. It's kind of just like, looks pretty normal. It's a sand whale. Like it's a whale that swims through the sand. Well, here's a size comparison of the Great Jaggy, the Gen Moran, and the Zinogre. And the player. Huge. What's crazy about this game is its sense of scale and its creature design, because the Gen Moran, though it may be big, it's a lot easier to fight than the Zinogre. The Great Jaggy is easier than all those. Like at the point that I am in the game, it's a pushover. It may sound like I'm ranting and sound like I have no idea no coherent thing that I'm talking about, but I'll get to that eventually. The review that I watched earlier is by YouTube channel called DM Jared. The guy on there is called Pro Jared. I was just watching his review, and it got me to thinking, man, I've made a huge sense of progress, because I saw like the equipment that he was showing in the review. He didn't necessarily show the point of the game where I'm at for sake of spoilers, because that would just kind of ruin it effectively, because you could show that in the review, but I feel like that mystery revolving around Monster Hunter is kind of lost by doing so. Seeing the gear that he was using and the monsters that he was fighting, like I took a step back, and I was astounded by how much progress I'd made, because in 100 hours I could realistically be done with the single player if I had chosen to be, but I took my time and I experienced what I wanted to experience out of the game. So point being, everyone's experience with Monster Hunter is going to be totally different, which is really cool and unique about Monster Hunter, because you kind of can't get the same thing from, let's say, Ratchet and Clank, where you're following a linear path and a story to saving the universe, which is the gist of Ratchet and Clank all the time. But Monster Hunter, there's no story, so everything that you do is by basically your own merit. And very few games have that sort of depth about it. So now to the original, the main point of why I bring up Monster Hunter. My friends that I did the podcast with, that would be Holden, Michael J, Seth, Conlin. I think that's it. Yeah, that's it for that one. Those guys convinced me that because I was able to play the game, Monster Hunter 3 Try for the Wii, because I was able to play it, and they did a thorough amount of convincing me that I need to play this game, along with Bevan and a few other people who weren't there for the podcast, but they told me I needed to play it. Because they told me I needed to play it, I did. And I have more than experienced the game. Just playing it is one thing, but experiencing a game is another. So I have thoroughly experienced what Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate has to give. I'm not done by any stretch of the imagination, because there's multiplayer and I have no friends to play with. This thing is limited. I went and convinced a few other of my friends to play or to purchase Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate. So that includes Michael, Brandon, and Lauren. I had talked with Michael about it a while ago. Like when I bought it, he bought it, so that was good. But in the past 2 days, as I was grinding out, I was also carrying out conversations with Lauren and Brandon to like, hey, you should get this game because it's super fun and stuff like that. And one of the things that Brandon asked me, so will you have to fight a monster over and over again, let's say a dozen times? And my answer was, realistically no, but you can if you want to get the stuff. If you're trying to say that you don't really want to get a grind out of it because you don't want to do that, this game is the grind fest of grind fests. And he was like, oh no. I was asking a dozen specifically because it's either a dozen or 60. And I would much rather do a dozen. So at that point, I was convinced that he was sold. Wrapping it all up, Monster Hunter is a great game, and you should play it because it's super fun. Whether it be on this little piece of crap, that's not crap. I really like my 3DS. Or it'd be on the Wii U. Now's the time to kind of get into it, because Monster Hunter 4 is going to be coming out in Japan soon, which means the advent of it coming out in the US is also upon us. So I'm going to leave it at that. I rambled on and ranted about one video game the whole time, which is my plan all along with these vlogs. So thank you for listening and watching, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.